Jake Morrison looked out the window of his ship and saw the green planet below. The world was covered in huge forests that seemed to glow with their own light. He had been a captain in the human space fleet for 10 years, but he had never seen anything like this place. The planet was called Zephyros Prime, and it was home to a race of beings that looked like the elves from old Earth stories. Jake wore his best blue uniform with shiny medals on his chest. Today was the most important day of his career. He was here to make peace between humans and the Zephyrian Elven Empire. The elves had technology that could help humanity, and humans had things the elves wanted too. But the elves were proud and dangerous. Many human diplomats had failed before Jake. The ship landed in a clearing surrounded by trees that were taller than Earth buildings. Jake walked down the ramp with his small team. The air smelled like flowers and something wild he could not name. Elven guards waited for them. They were tall and beautiful, with pointed ears and eyes that seemed to see everything. They carried weapons that looked like they were grown from plants, but Jake knew they could cut through steel. The guards led Jake and his team through a city built inside the trees. Houses and walkways wound around massive tree trunks. Elven. People stopped to stare at the humans. Their clothes looked like they were made from leaves and moonlight. Jake felt very out of place in his heavy uniform. The royal palace was carved inside the biggest tree Jake had ever seen. The walls were alive and glowing with soft green light. Flowers bloomed and closed as they walked past. Jake tried to look confident, but his hands were sweating inside his gloves. Queen Lirelei Starweaver sat on a throne made from twisted wood and crystal. She was the most beautiful and scary person Jake had ever seen. She was over 6 feet tall, with silver hair that moved like water. Her violet eyes looked at Jake like she was deciding whether to talk to him or have him arrested. She wore a dress that seemed to be made from starlight and shadow. The queen spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. Her English was perfect, but had a musical accent that made Jake feel dizzy. She said the humans were welcome, but must prove they were worth her time. Jake bowed like he had practiced, but he felt clumsy next to the graceful elves. The feast that night was held in a great hall with walls of living wood. The ceiling was open to the sky, and strange glowing insects danced above the tables. Jake sat at the high table next to the queen. The food looked beautiful, but Jake was not sure what any of it was. There were fruits that changed color when he touched them, and bread that seemed to sing when he cut it. The queen explained that sharing food was very important to elves. Different foods meant different things. Some foods were for friends, some for family, and some for enemies. Jake nodded and tried to remember everything, but there were so many rules his head hurt. When the queen offered him a golden fruit from her own plate, Jake made his first mistake. He did not know that accepting food from the queen's hand meant agreeing to become part of her family. He was afraid the fruit might be poisonous to humans, so he politely refused. The entire hall went quiet. The queen's eyes turned cold. She spoke to her people in their own language, and Jake heard anger in her musical voice. His translator whispered that he had just insulted the queen in the worst possible way. Jake tried to apologize, but the damage was done. That was when he first saw Princess Aria. She was sitting at a smaller table with other young elves, but she kept looking at Jake with curious green eyes. She looked like a human child of about 8 years old, but Jake knew that elves age differently. She had the same silver hair as her mother, but her face was round and sweet. During a break in the feast, Jake saw his chance to fix his mistake. He walked over to the princess's table and knelt down so he was at her eye level. He pulled a piece of chocolate from his pocket. It was real Earth chocolate, something no elf had ever tasted. Jake offered the chocolate to Princess Aria with a chew. Smile. He said he was sorry for making her mother angry and hoped she would like this gift from his world. The little princess looked at the chocolate with wonder. But instead of taking it from his hand, she did something that changed Jake's life forever. Princess. Arya grabbed Jake's hand and bit his finger right through his glove. Her small teeth were sharp, and Jake yelped in surprise. But before he could pull his hand away, the princess looked up at him with chocolate around her mouth and said in broken English, "Dad, you taste like home." The entire hall fell silent. Again, but this silence was different. It was the silence of shock and fear. Queen Lirelei stood up so fast her chair fell over. The other elves began talking in excited whispers. Jake looked at his bleeding finger, and then at the little girl, who was smiling at him like he was the best thing in the world. The queen rushed over and spoke, rapidly in Elven, to her daughter. Princess Arya just giggled and hugged Jake's leg, calling him Papa Jake over and over. Jake looked around at all the staring faces and knew that something very important had just happened. But he had no idea what Queen Lirelei turned to Jake with an expression he could not read. She said that according to ancient Elven law, when a child of royal blood bites someone while claiming them as family, it creates an unbreakable bond. Princess Arya had just made Jake her legal father. Since Arya was the heir to the throne, Jake would now have to marry the queen to make the adoption proper under Elven law. Jake felt the world spinning around him. He looked at the little girl still hugging his leg, then at the tall queen, who looked like she wanted to throw him out the nearest window, then at his own people, who were staring at him in shock. The last thing Jake remembered before everything went black was thinking that this was definitely not in the diplomat's handbook. Jake woke up in a room that smelled like medicine and flowers. The walls were made of smooth wood that glowed softly in the dim light. He was lying on a bed that felt like it was grown rather than built. His head hurt and his finger was wrapped in something that looked like a leaf but felt better than any bandage he had ever used. Dr. Maya Collins sat in a chair next to his bed. She was the chief medical officer for the human team and Jake's old friend from the academy. Maya had short brown hair and kind eyes behind her glasses. She looked worried as she checked the readings on a device that seemed to be part plant and part machine. Maya explained what had happened while Jake was unconscious. The Elven doctors had examined him and found that Princess Arya's bite had changed something in his body. Elves had special chemicals in their saliva that could mark someone as family. The change was permanent and could not be reversed by any known science. Jake sat up slowly and looked at his bandaged finger. He asked Maya if this meant he was really stuck. Maya nodded and said that according to every test they had run, Jake now had the chemical signature of Princess Arya's father. The Elven computers recognized him as royal family, and even the palace guards treated him differently. The door to the medical room opened, and Queen Lirelei walked in. She moved like a cat, silent and graceful. In the daylight streaming through the windows, Jake could see that she was even more beautiful than he remembered. But her face was cold and distant. The queen spoke to Maya first, thanking her for taking care of Jake. Then she turned to Jake and said they needed to talk. Maya took the hint and left them alone. Jake tried to stand up, but the queen gestured for him to stay seated. Queen Lirelei explained the situation in her musical voice. She said that Elven law was absolute and could not be changed even by the queen herself. Since Princess Arya had claimed Jake as her father, he was now legally responsible for her. Since Arya was the heir to the throne, Jake had to marry the queen to make sure the succession was proper. Jake asked what would happen if he refused and went back to his ship. The queen's eyes flashed with something that might have been hurt or anger. She said that if Jake left, Princess Arya would be heartbroken and might never trust anyone again. The political alliance between humans and elves would be destroyed. And Jake himself would always carry the chemical mark that made him Arya's father, so he would never feel complete away from her. The queen said she understood that Jake did not choose this situation. She did not love him and did not expect him to love her. But they both had duties to their people and to the little girl who had changed everything with one bite. They had 1 month to prepare for the royal wedding and to learn how to be a family. Jake asked if he could see Princess Arya. The queen's expression softened just a little. She said that Arya had been asking for her Papa Jake since he fainted. The queen led Jake through corridors filled with living art and rooms where plants grew in impossible shapes. They found Princess Arya in a garden that looked like something from a fairy tale. She was sitting by a pond, talking to fish that seemed to understand her. When she saw Jake, she jumped up and ran to him with a huge smile. She hugged his legs and chattered in Elven, mixed with broken English. Jake knelt down and looked at the little girl who had accidentally become his daughter. She had grass stains on her dress and flowers in her silver hair. Her green eyes sparkled with mischief and joy. She showed Jake how she could make flowers bloom just by touching them, and how she could ask birds to land on her hand. Princess Arya asked Jake if he was really going to be her papa forever. Jake looked at her sweet face and found he could not imagine disappointing her. He said yes, he would be her papa, but she had to help him learn how to do it right. Arya clapped her hands and said she would teach him everything. Over the next few days, Jake tried to learn about his new life. Ambassador Linda Price from the human delegation helped him understand Elven customs. Linda was a smart woman with gray hair who had studied alien cultures for 20 years. She explained that elves lived much longer than humans and thought about time differently. What seemed rushed to Jake was actually very slow for them. The other elven nobles were not sure what to think about Jake. Some of them thought it was funny that a human had accidentally become royal. Others thought it was an insult to their ancient bloodlines. A few seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture. Jake spent most of his time with Princess Arya, who followed him everywhere. She showed him secret passages in the palace and taught him words in the Elven language. Jake taught her about human technology and showed her pictures of Earth. She was fascinated by snow, which did not exist on her war world. Arya was incredibly smart for a child. She could speak 6 languages and understand complex mathematics. She could make plants grow with her mind and talk to animals, but she was also lonely. Her father had died in battle when she was very young, and Queen Lirelei was often too busy ruling to spend time with her. Jake learned that the queen was not cold by choice. She had been forced to become hard and distant to survive as a ruler. The other elven houses were always looking for weakness, and showing too much emotion could be seen as a flaw. But Jake noticed that when the queen thought no one was looking, she watched her daughter with eyes full of love and worry. One evening, Jake was walking with Arya in the palace gardens when dark shapes dropped from the trees. They were elves dressed in black, with weapons that hummed with energy. Jake pushed Arya behind him and shouted for the guards. The attackers moved faster than Jake thought possible. One of them grabbed Arya and put a knife to her throat. He spoke in Elven, but Jake's translator told him the man was demanding that Jake leave the planet immediately. The attackers were from a rival house that did not want humans and elves to become allies. Jake did not have any weapons, but he had something the elves did not expect. He had a small device from his ship that could create a bright flash of light and a loud noise. When he activated it, the attackers were blinded and confused for just a moment. That moment was enough. Jake grabbed Arya and rolled behind a fountain as the palace guards arrived. The attackers tried to escape, but the queen herself appeared with more soldiers. She moved like a deadly dancer, her weapon spinning in patterns too fast to follow. The attackers were captured before they could reach the trees. Queen Lirelei rushed to her daughter and held her close. For the first time since Jake had met her, the queen looked scared. She checked Arya for injuries while speaking softly in Elven. Then she looked at Jake with an expression he had never seen before. The Queen thanked Jake for protecting her daughter. She said that his quick thinking had saved Arya's life. Jake said he would always protect his daughter, no matter what. The Queen stared at him for a long moment, and Jake thought he saw something warm in her violet eyes. That night, the Queen came to Jake's room. She said the attack proved that their marriage was not just about law and politics anymore. There were people who would hurt Arya to stop the alliance between their peoples. Jake and the Queen would have to work together to keep their daughter safe. Jake realized that somewhere in the past few days, he had stopped thinking about Princess Arya as an accident and started thinking about her as his real daughter. The idea of anyone hurting her made him angrier than he had ever been. He looked at Queen Lirelei and saw that she felt the same way. Maybe they did not love each other yet, but they both loved Arya. That would have to be enough to start with. The training ground was a circular space surrounded by tall trees. The floor was covered with soft grass that never seemed to get damaged no matter how hard the fighters landed on it. Jake stood in the center, holding an elven practice sword that felt alive in his hands. Queen Lirelei circled him like a predator, her own weapon moving in graceful patterns. Jake tried to block her attack, but she was too fast. The Queen's sword touched his chest gently, but he knew it could have killed him easily. She stepped back and shook her head. Her silver hair was not even messy, while Jake was breathing hard and sweating. The Queen said that Jake was thinking, like a human, trying to overpower his opponent with strength and aggression. Elven fighting was about flow and balance, like water moving around rocks. Jake had to learn to feel the rhythm of the battle and move with it instead of against it. They practiced every morning before Princess Arya woke up. At first, Jake was frustrated because he could not even touch the Queen with his sword. But slowly, he began to understand what she meant about flow. Instead of trying to hit her directly, he learned to guide her attacks away from him and find openings in her defense. During these training sessions, Jake and Queen Lirelei talked more than they ever had before. She told him about her childhood, when she learned to fight because her older brother said girls could not be warriors. She explained how she became queen so young when her father died in the same battle that killed Arya's father. Jake told her about growing up on a space station where his parents worked as engineers. He explained how he joined the space fleet because he wanted to see new worlds and meet new people. He never expected to become a father and husband on an alien planet, but he was starting to think it might be the best accident of his life. Princess Arya usually found them after their training sessions. She would run onto the field with her, hair flying behind her, and her arms full of flowers she had picked. She would hug both Jake and her mother, chattering about her dreams from the night before, or something interesting she had seen in the gardens. Jake loved these moments when they felt like a real family. Queen Lirelei would smile at her daughter, and her whole face would change. The cold, distant ruler would disappear, and Jake could see the loving mother underneath. He began to understand that the Queen's coldness was armor she wore to protect herself and her people. Arya had taken it upon herself to teach Jake about elven culture. She showed him how to make flowers bloom by singing to them in the elven language. She taught him which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make him sick. She explained the difference between the formal bow for nobles and the casual wave for friends. Jake taught Arya about human technology and culture in return. He showed her how to use his tablet computer and let her watch videos of Earth animals. She was fascinated by penguins and asked 100 questions about ice and snow. Jake promised that someday he would take her to see real snow. Their favorite project was building a workshop in one of the unused palace rooms. Jake brought tools and equipment from his ship, while Arya used her plant magic to create living furniture and decorations. Together they built devices that mixed human technology with elven magic in ways that should not have worked, but did. Arya created a flower that could translate any language perfectly. Jake built a communication device that could send messages across space instantly using the flower's natural abilities. They made a small robot that was powered by sunlight and water like a plant, but could also think and talk like a computer. Chief Engineer Katie Barnes from Jake's ship became a regular visitor to their workshop. Katie was a practical woman with strong hands and a mind that loved solving impossible puzzles. She was amazed by what Jake and Arya were creating together. Katie said their inventions could change how humans and elves worked together forever. Katie brought other human crew members to see the workshop. Soon there were humans and elves working side by side on projects that neither species could have completed alone. The palace began to buzz with excitement as new ideas and technologies emerged from these partnerships. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Commander Rex Palmer arrived from Earth with 3 human warships and an attitude that made Jake's teeth hurt. Rex had been Jake's rival at the academy, always trying to prove he was better at everything. He was tall and handsome with perfect hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Rex demanded a meeting with Jake in the palace's main hall. He brought a squad of human marines in full battle armor, which made the elven guards very nervous. Rex announced that he was there to bring Jake home because Jake was compromising humanity's position by submitting to alien customs. Jake said he was not submitting to anyone. He had found a new life and a family that needed him. Rex laughed and said that Jake had been brainwashed by alien magic. He claimed that Princess Arya's bite had done something to Jake's mind to make him loyal to the elves. Princess Arya ran into the hall and hid behind Jake's legs. She had been listening from the doorway and was scared by the angry human soldiers. Rex looked at her with disgust and said she was just an alien creature pretending to be human-like to trick Jake. Jake felt anger rise in his chest like a fire. He told Rex that Arya was his daughter, and anyone who insulted her would answer to him. Rex smiled his cold smile and said that proved his point about Jake being compromised. Queen Lirelei entered the hall with her own guards. She moved with deadly grace, and Jake could see that she was ready for battle. She spoke to Rex in perfect English, welcoming him to her world, but warning him to show respect or leave immediately. Rex made another mistake then. He looked Queen Lirelei up and down like she was something he might buy, and said that she was attractive for an alien. He suggested that maybe he could negotiate a better deal between humans and elves than Jake could. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Queen Lirelei's violet eyes turned to ice, and her hand moved to her weapon. The elven guards stepped forward, their plant-based armor shifting into battle mode. Even Princess Arya growled softly, her small hands glowing with green energy. Jake stepped between Rex and his family. He said that Rex had insulted the queen of the Elven Empire and endangered the peace between their peoples. As the human ambassador, Jake was ordering Rex to leave immediately or face the consequences. Rex said that Jake had no authority to give him orders. He pulled out a device that he claimed would prove Jake was under alien influence. The device made a high-pitched whining sound and shot a beam of red light at Jake. But before the beam could hit Jake, Princess Arya jumped in front of him. The red light struck her instead, and she screamed and fell to the floor. Jake caught her as she collapsed, her small body shaking with pain. Queen Lirelei's scream of rage echoed through the palace. Her sword appeared in her hand as if by magic, and she moved toward Rex with murder in her eyes. Jake shouted for her to stop while he held his daughter close. Arya whispered something in Jake's ear that made his blood freeze. She said that the device had not been meant to test for alien influence. It was a weapon designed to break the bond between her and Jake. But because she had taken the hit instead of him, something else had happened. The bond had grown stronger, but now she could feel something terrible coming toward their world. Princess. Arya looked up at Jake with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her years. She said that ancient enemies were returning, enemies that had destroyed worlds before. The only way to stop them was for humans and elves to truly become one people. Jake looked at his daughter, then at his wife, then at the human soldiers who were supposed to be his allies, but now seemed like strangers. He realized that his choice was not between his old life and his new one. His choice was between fear and love, between division and unity. Jake stood up with Princess Arya in his arms and faced Commander Rex. He said that he chose his family and his new people. If Rex wanted to take him away from them, Rex would have to fight not just Jake, but every elf in the palace and every human who had learned to work alongside them. Katie Barnes stepped forward with the other human crew members who had been working in the palace. She said they stood with Jake and would not let anyone hurt Princess Arya or Queen Lirelei. One by one, Rex's own Marines laid down their weapons and joined Katie. Rex found himself alone with his hatred and his fear. He looked around the hall, filled with humans and elves standing together, and Jake saw something like panic in his eyes. Rex activated a communicator and called for his ships to prepare for battle. But Jake was no longer afraid. He had his family, his people, and a cause worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The wedding day arrived with a sunrise that painted the sky in colors Jake had never seen on Earth. The great tree that held the royal palace was decorated with flowers that sang in harmony and lights that danced like living stars. Elves from across the empire had come to witness their queen marry a human, and humans from Jake's ship mixed with the alien guests like they had been friends for years. Jake stood in his room looking at himself in a mirror made from polished crystal. He wore traditional elven wedding clothes that felt strange but beautiful. The shirt was woven from threads that changed color with his emotions, and the jacket was covered with symbols that told the story of his accidental journey to fatherhood. Katie Barnes had helped him get dressed and was now fixing his hair with the patience of a saint. Katie told Jake that he looked nervous, which was normal for any groom, but especially one who was about to participate in an elven bonding ceremony. She explained that Dr. Maya Collins had studied the ritual and found that it would create a real mental connection between Jake and Queen Lirelei. They would be able to sense each other's thoughts and emotions for the rest of their lives. Jake admitted that the mental bond scared him more than anything else about getting married. What if Queen Lirelei looked into his mind and decided she did not like what she found there? Katie laughed and said that after everything they had been through together, the queen probably already knew Jake better than he knew himself. Princess Arya burst into the room wearing a dress that looked like it was made from butterfly wings and moonbeams. She had flowers in her silver hair and a huge smile on her face. She told Jake that she had a special surprise for the wedding, something she had been working on in secret with the palace artists. Captain Sophie Martinez arrived just as Katie was putting the finishing touches on Jake's appearance. Sophie was Jake's best friend and had served as his second in command for 3 years. She had short red hair and a laugh that could be heard across a spaceship. Sophie said she was honored to be Jake's best woman and promised to make sure he did not faint during the ceremony. The wedding was held in the heart of the great tree, in a chamber that was open to the sky, but surrounded by living walls that pulsed with gentle light. Hundreds of guests sat on benches that had grown from the floor like mushrooms. Human technology mixed with elven magic to create decorations that were both beautiful and impossible. Jake walked down an aisle covered with flower petals that glowed when he stepped on them. At the end of the aisle waited Queen Lirelei, and Jake's breath caught in his throat when he saw her. She wore a dress that seemed to be made from starlight and shadow, and her silver hair was crowned with flowers that bloomed and changed as he watched. The Queen's violet eyes met Jake's, and he saw something in them that had not been there before. It was not love exactly, but it was warm and gentle and made Jake feel like he was coming home. She smiled at him, and Jake realized that somewhere during their month of preparation, they had become real partners. Princess Arya stood beside her, mother holding a basket of special flowers. She beamed at Jake and whispered that she was so happy to finally have a real papa and mama at the same time. The ceremony began with elven priests singing in voices that made the very air vibrate with music. The priest explained that elven marriage was not just a legal contract, but a joining of souls that would last forever. Jake and Queen Lirelei would share their strengths and weaknesses, their joys and sorrows, their very lives. Jake felt his hands shaking as he repeated the ancient vows in the elven language that Arya had taught him. When it came time for the bonding ritual, Jake and Queen Lirelei placed their hands on a crystal that pulsed with warm light. Jake felt something like electricity run up his arm and into his mind. Suddenly, he could sense Queen Lirelei's thoughts and emotions as clearly as his own. He felt her nervousness, her hope, her fierce love for Princess Arya, and underneath it all, a growing affection for him that surprised them both. She felt his determination to protect their family, his wonder at the magical world he had stumbled into, and his deep gratitude for the chance to be part of something bigger than himself. The mental connection settled into place like a missing piece of a puzzle. Jake and Queen Lirelei looked at each other with new understanding. They were married now in every way that mattered, bound together by love for their daughter and commitment to their people. Princess Arya presented her special surprise during the gift ceremony. She had created a living portrait that showed the three of them as a family, but the figures moved and changed to show different moments from their time together. Jake saw himself fainting at their first meeting, learning to fight with the Queen, working in their workshop, and holding Arya when she was hurt. The celebration continued late into the night with dancing and music that made the stars seem to dance in the sky above them. Jake danced with his new wife and daughter, with Katie and Sophie, and with elven nobles who had decided that maybe humans were not so bad after all. But in the middle of the celebration, alarms began to sound. The elven warning system was based on plants and animals that could sense danger from far away. Every flower in the palace suddenly closed its petals, and the night-singing birds fell silent. Queen Lirelei's face went pale as she received reports from her scouts. Something was approaching their star system, something that made space itself feel cold and empty. Through their new mental bond, Jake felt her terror and understood that this was not just any enemy. The Queen called for an emergency council meeting, and Jake found himself sitting at the table where the most important decisions in the Elven Empire were made. The Queen explained that the approaching enemy was called the Void Swarm, an ancient race of energy-consuming parasites that had destroyed the original Elven homeworld thousands of years ago. The Void Swarm fed on life energy and technology, making them uniquely dangerous to both humans and elves. They could drain the power from machines and the life from living beings, leaving behind empty husks. The elves had thought the swarm was gone forever, but somehow they had found this world. Admiral Lisa Hayes, the commander of Jake's ship, joined the council meeting by video link. She reported that her sensors were detecting massive distortions in space at the edge of the star system. Whatever was coming was bigger than anything in the human fleet, and it was moving faster than should be possible. Jake felt Princess Arya's small hand slip into his. Through the mental bond with his wife, he could sense that Arya was not just scared, but somehow connected to what was happening. The device that Commander Rex had used on her had done more than strengthen her bond with Jake. It had awakened something in her that had been sleeping. Arya whispered that she could feel the Void Swarm's hunger like ice in her bones. But she could also feel something else, something that might be able to stop them. The bond between her human father and elven mother had created something new in her, something that was both species but also neither. The first Void Swarm Scouts arrived just as the council meeting was ending. They looked like shadows given form, creatures of darkness that seemed to absorb light and warmth. When they touched the outer defenses of the planet, the energy shields flickered and failed. Jake and Queen Lirelei worked together to coordinate the defense, their mental bond allowing them to share thoughts faster than any communication system. Jake's human tactical training combined with the Queen's intuitive understanding of elven magic to create strategies that neither could have developed alone. Princess Arya insisted on helping despite her parents' protests. She used her unique abilities to interface with both human computers and elven plant networks, creating a defense system that was truly hybrid. Her small hands moved over controls that responded to her like living things. The battle for the planet's orbital defenses was fierce but brief. The Void Swarm's advanced scouts were testing their enemies, learning their capabilities. When the elven and human ships working together managed to destroy several of the shadow creatures, the rest retreated beyond the edge of the star system. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Through the mental bond, he felt Queen Lirelei's certainty that the real invasion would come soon. And when it did, their current preparations would not be enough to save either of their peoples. Princess Arya looked up at her parents with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. She said she knew what they had to do, but it would require trust and sacrifice from everyone. The only way to defeat the Void Swarm was for humans and elves to become truly one people, sharing not just technology and tactics, but their very essence. Jake looked at his wife and daughter, then at the stars where an ancient enemy was gathering. Its strength. He realized that their accidental family had become the key to saving both their civilizations. Whatever came next, they would face it together as one people with one purpose. The medical bay in the royal palace had been transformed into something that looked like a mixture of a human laboratory and an elven garden. Dr. Maya Collins worked alongside elven healers who grew their medicines from living plants. The air smelled like flowers and ozone as they prepared for the most dangerous experiment in the history of both species. Jake lay on a table that felt alive beneath him, its surface warm and somehow comforting. Tubes and vines connected him to machines that hummed with both electricity and natural magic. Queen Lirelei lay on a similar table next to him, her hand reaching out to hold his. Through their mental bond, Jake could feel her determination mixed with fear for what they were about to attempt. Princess Arya sat between her parents, her small hands glowing with green energy as she served as the living bridge for the transformation. She had explained that the only way to defeat the Void Swarm was for humans and elves to truly become one people, sharing not just technology, but their very biological essence. The process would change Jake and Queen Lirelei in ways that had never been tried before. Jake would undergo elven modification, allowing plant-based magic to alter his human biology while keeping his essential self intact. Queen Lirelei would accept human, cybernetic implants that would let her interface with computer systems while maintaining her natural abilities. Dr. Maya Collins checked the readings on her instruments one more time. She said that according to their calculations, the transformation should work, but there were no guarantees. If something went wrong, Jake and Queen Lirelei could die, leaving Princess Arya orphaned just when their people needed them most. Katie Barnes stood at a control panel that mixed human technology with elven biosystems in ways that should have been impossible. She said that every engineer in both fleets had worked around the clock to build the machines that would make the transformation possible. The success of the entire plan depended on the love and trust between this accidental Family. Jake felt the transformation begin as microscopic elven organisms entered his bloodstream. At first there was pain, like fire racing through his veins, but then Princess Arya's power flowed into him, and the pain became something else. He could suddenly sense every living thing in the palace, from the smallest flower to the great tree. That housed them all. Queen Lirelei gasped as human neural implants activated in her brain. Jake felt her confusion through their bond, as digital information flooded her consciousness. But Arya was there for her too, helping her mother understand the flow of data and electricity that was foreign to elven experience. The real test came when they tried to share consciousness. Jake opened his mind completely to his wife and daughter, letting them see all his memories and fears and hopes. Queen Lirelei did the same, showing them the weight of responsibility she had carried for so many years, and the loneliness that had nearly broken her spirit. Princess Arya became the center of a triangle of shared thought and emotion. Through her, Jake could feel what it was like to have magic flowing in his blood, and to sense the natural world as a living web of energy. Queen Lirelei experienced human logic and the ability to process vast amounts of information in seconds. But Arya was more than just a bridge between her parents. The transformation revealed that she had become something new, the first truly hybrid human elf with abilities that neither species possessed alone. She could interface with technology using magic and cast spells through computer systems. She was the future of what their two peoples could become together. Alarms sounded throughout the palace as the Void Swarm arrived in full force. Through the palace's living sensor network, they could feel the approaching darkness like ice water in their veins. The enemy had brought ships the size of moons, creatures of shadow and hunger that wanted to devour everything that lived. Jake and Queen Lirelei rose from the transformation tables, their bodies still adapting to the changes, but their minds united in purpose. Jake could feel the palace's biosystems responding to his thoughts, while Queen Lirelei processed tactical data from human computers as easily as reading the wind. The combined human-elven fleet took position around the planet. Ships that had been modified with both technologies moved in formations that blended human precision with elven intuition. Weapons that channeled magic through particle beams, charged with power that neither species could have achieved alone. Jake commanded the defense from the flagship, Unity's Promise, with Queen Lirelei as his co-admiral and Princess Arya as their role. Communications specialist, the little girl sat at a control panel that responded to her hybrid abilities, her voice carrying across space to coordinate ships from both fleets. The battle began when the Void Swarm's largest ship tried to drain power from the planet's energy grid. But the new hybrid systems were designed to flow like living things, adapting and changing faster than the parasites could consume them. Every time the swarm tried to feed, the energy slipped away like water. Jake felt his consciousness expand as he linked with every ship in the fleet through the neural network that Princess Arya maintained. He could see the battle from 100 different viewpoints, think with the combined intelligence of both species, and react faster than any individual mind could process. Queen Lirelei used her new technological abilities to predict the swarms' attack patterns, while her natural magic protected their ships from the creature's life-draining touch. She moved through digital space like she had once moved through forests, finding paths and possibilities that pure logic could not reveal. The turning point came when Princess Arya discovered that the Void Swarm's greatest strength was also their weakness. They were so focused on consuming energy that they could not adapt when that energy was turned against them. Arya used her hybrid abilities to reverse the flow of their feeding process, making them drain themselves instead of their targets. Jake guided the combined fleet in a coordinated attack that used the swarm's own hunger as a weapon. Every time the shadow creatures tried to feed, human technology and elven magic worked together to redirect their consumption back on themselves. The largest void swarm ships began to collapse as they consumed their own energy. The battle raged for hours, but slowly the tide turned in favor of the Allied forces. The void swarm had never faced an enemy that could adapt and change as quickly as the human-elven hybrid systems. Their ancient tactics of overwhelming consumption failed against opponents, who could flow around their attacks like water around stones. When the last void swarm ship collapsed into dark matter, the cheers from both fleets echoed across space. Jake felt tears on his cheeks as he realized they had not just won a battle, but proved that cooperation was stronger than any force in the universe. Princess Arya looked up at her parents with eyes that sparkled with exhaustion and triumph. She said she was proud to be part of a family that had brought two peoples together and shown that differences made them stronger, not weaker. She wanted to be an ambassador princess when she grew up, helping other species learn to work together. The way humans and elves had docked in the weeks that followed, Jake found himself writing a letter to his old mentor at the Space Academy. He tried to explain how a diplomatic mission had turned into the most important thing he had ever done. He wrote about learning that family could be found in the most unexpected places, and that love was not something that happened to you, but something you chose to build every day. The Human-Elven Alliance became the foundation for a new kind of interstellar confederation, one based on cooperation rather than conquest. Jake served as the first human-elven ambassador, traveling to other worlds to share what they had learned about unity and understanding. Queen Lirale commanded the Joint Defense Fleet, protecting peaceful worlds from threats like the Void Swarm. Her combination of elven wisdom and human technology made her one of the most respected military leaders in known space. Princess Arya started a school for hybrid children from various species, teaching them that being different was not something to hide but something to celebrate. Her students learned to use their unique abilities to build bridges between their peoples, just as she had built a bridge between humans and elves. Late at night, when the palace was quiet and the 3 moons of Zephyros Prime painted silver light across the gardens, Jake sometimes stood at his window and marveled at how his life had changed. He had come to this world as a diplomat trying to make a deal, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found a family that chose him, a purpose that fulfilled him, and a love that grew stronger every day. Sometimes he still could not believe that getting bitten by a mischievous alien princess had been the best thing that ever happened to him. Princess Arya often joined him at the window, climbing onto his lap to watch the stars and ask questions about the future. She would point to distant lights and wonder what kinds of people lived there and whether they might need help learning to work together. Jake would hold his daughter close and tell her that somewhere out there, other families were being formed. In unexpected ways, other peoples were learning to see past their differences, and other children were growing up to be bridges between worlds. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but Jake had learned that the greatest wonder of all was the power of love to create families and unite peoples who had once been synced.